Hey guys, here I am with the 15th part. Black Squad, criminal organization, yeah. Handled the radio thing well, made some money with it, no question. Money is always a tricky topic, and he says, yeah, you could get by for a while with that. There are still earnings from all kinds of different businesses and so on. But for most criminals, there's never enough money. The costs keep rising, and you meet people who say, hey, listen, I've got another idea, let's try this, and so on. But the more money you earn, of course, the costs keep rising. You buy useless things, really a lot of knickknacks. Maybe you let others share a bit in your life. If you live a bit of brotherhood or camaraderie, you let them share a little, but you still make sure that you're the first in line and that you have the most. But now, of course, it was also the case that when we pulled off things like that together with Daniel, and then Carlos told us that he also got money, and then you go and gamble and so on and buy yourself expensive clothes. Then for everyone else in the club, it's kind of like, yeah, I'd like that too. Yeah, why are you doing that with Carlos? Why did you do the big thing with Daniel? I thought we were club brothers. Now you might think, or maybe someone among you is asking, and that's a very good question, why isn't this being addressed? Well, that would be nice if we had managed to do that, and I always point the finger at myself first. All these sensitivities among each other were not addressed. Every little thing was addressed, like, Klein, you did this in the clubhouse and that, and you were late there and so on, or not carrying a knife and whatever else. But these really big issues, like, you brought me into the business, I can barely afford the club dues, I don't know how the motorcycle is paid for, I don't know how I'm going to pay for gas and so on. These big issues, as far as I remember, were hardly ever addressed, maybe always out of fear of a major conflict. I only heard about those events indirectly at first, later I witnessed them myself. I didn't hear about it anymore, but we'll get to that much later. Of course, there's a gap. Then there's a gap in between. One person gets 15,000 a month on the outside, the other has 1,500 net available, and one says, I don't care about filling up 3 times a week, while the other doesn't even know how he'll fill up once a month. And we also had it in our club rules that if a member wants to do something, then the other members basically don't have veto rights. Yes, with the brochure and the trailer and so on, there was still a kind of possibility for intervention. Not to say, oh, you're not allowed to become a criminal, but if something sounded strange and if there were no members involved, how could it be that a prospect was making money on his own? That's how we took it. We also always said that we wouldn't necessarily get involved with heroin. Wanting to get involved with heroin, that's such a high moral standard, which also some people have. Other big biker clubs do that too, saying they won't get into that business, but that's all just a nice show from the outside. If there's enough money to be made and someone says you can make 500,000 euros in just 1 month, then those moral values disappear pretty quickly. And yes, then a few of them got together and once again they joined forces in the simplest way possible. It was like in the Kameradschaft Werwolf series. The thing is, this burglary stuff is one thing, let's put it that way, you don't need any connections for that. But to get into drug dealing and get involved in something like the radio station and moving drugs there or other bigger fraud cases and so on, for that you really need to know people. And not everyone in our club was well connected. I brought Thoman over from the Werbehof comradeship and he wasn't well connected. He didn't care about networking. Anyone could party and talk nonsense with him, but he wasn't the type to meet up with people, have dinner on a Tuesday or travel to Schwerin, Rostock, Berlin or Hamburg to see them. He just didn't do that. And then, of course, you don't get access to those bigger deals that you plan, like ripping people off, fines and all those things. And then I would say these 3 who were rather disappointed teamed up to figure out how to get by and started scouting out places where they could break in. That was then a full member with us, Tomanen O and Hans Wurst. You already know him from the prison series, so people also watch the old series. So you already know him from the series. They teamed up to pick out targets. Where do you look for targets? Of course, right outside your own door. Yeah, none of them were really big travelers. Yeah, they're called travelers, and people usually say you don't rob your own local bank. Yeah, you don't rob the branch where you're a customer. I would have preferred if it was taken a bit further out. But I also have to say we weren't really included in the planning. We didn't like it at all. My vice president at the time, the sergeant and so on, we were not fans at all of the fact that the 30 had come together. But as I said, this member status allowed them to do and say whatever they wanted in terms of crime. He couldn't just tell me directly that he thought what I did with the radio station sucked, especially since he really enjoyed listening to it, and that it was messed up for me to blackmail them over an intern's drug debts. He couldn't have done that with me either. The problem with those who got together there is, how should I put this without, let's just say there's no mastermind among them. Yeah, so they're nice. Average in talent like me, yeah, but none of them who would say, I'll plan everything out. And it's quite something to tell, and we knew, okay, this is crap, this smells like trouble. And then they were like, okay, so you get together and say, okay, we want to try something, maybe make some money, we need money, how can we make money? Yeah, then there was the discussion, robbing supermarkets, storming in at Christmas, yeah, going to the register, shooting into the ceiling with a machine pistol, and so on. And then you have to imagine you're sitting in the clubhouse, or we're sitting outside in the garden, because in the clubhouse I never really liked the conversations. You're sitting in the club's garden, and then we just need a driver. We need to get an A4, we storm in, shoot into the ceiling first, and we could do that at Kaufland, Makan, Row, whatever they're called, and do it on a holiday, and then shoot into the ceiling right away, everyone down, and then getaway car. And you think, crap, no, please not, no, please not. I mean, we were criminals, no question, but storming into a supermarket and just firing into the ceiling with a machine pistol, no, please not. Then you try to talk to them in a way like, yeah, good idea, but I have a few points where I'd say it's crap, team is crap, planning is crap, just shooting randomly is crap, doing it in your own city is crap. So you try to make it sound a bit less appealing, like let's wait, we need to get together first, and so on. And then they pulled off the first 12 things. Then it was about stealing construction equipment. Yeah, we were kind of connected with a few guys who had construction companies who were always looking for something. I have to say, I don't know how many of them. Stealing things from each other and having stuff from other tradesmen is unfortunately very, very common in the East. We were also part of that machinery, yeah. That means first we broke into warehouses, then stole certain things, and then, yeah, you just take out a machine, and when there are three of you and you take out a machine that's worth, I don't know, €1,000, you get 350 for it used, and then you split that by three. I just don't see it as like you sit back and start looking at a yacht in Monaco. Instead, okay, a lot of effort, a lot of risk, and so on. But it also conditioned their brains. Yeah, we're successful with it. You could tell that it gradually increased. Some of you might know that, hashtag I know it, that even people who thought they could handle it, they had their first 123 successes, and then they feel like they're 3 meters tall, 3 meters wide, and now the world belongs to us, and now we can soon make the really big deal and clean out the Louvre. And that was just, you could feel it. Yeah, then they did a few things where people said, please don't do that so often and so on. And then there were conversations, and that really stuck with me, you know, when they were already so open with us. Of course, we were trusted, we're a club, and that trust in clubs is already hard enough. Yeah. Then there were suggestions like, yeah, there's the new PlayStation, what's up today, what's going on around 5 today. I think the PlayStation 3 or 4 came out then. I have no idea about those things. And then they said, yeah, a big mixed supermarket or something like that. They somehow get about 20 of them. They heard that again from someone, plus games. And then a big plan was made about how to break in there, for example. And then they went shopping there, checking out how everything could be done, all secretive, like holding a can of ravioli in their hand. And then you play it out, looking for cameras and motion detectors and checking out what the ceiling looks like and everything else. And then you go through there 5 times, buy ravioli 5 times. And for me, the plans that always came afterwards were really exciting. I'm also a bit curious and almost like a voyeur. I would have liked to watch it from the outside. And then it was always like, yeah, we've now planned it in that store in Wismar. We would rappel down from the ceiling. Good idea. Good idea. Yeah, then we'll go onto the roof from outside. An acquaintance of ours also lived there. He had an apartment there. He would have left the door open for us. Then we could get onto the roof. It was a large mixed-use complex with a supermarket, apartments, and some dining options. And then we would get onto the roof, and then we would use the construction equipment we have. Then they got themselves a gas-powered angle grinder from some big brand manufacturer, white and orange, a big gas-powered angle grinder. And then we would cut up there a hole in the ceiling. And then we rappel down, and I'm like, yeah, okay, let me put it this way. A gas-powered angle grinder is, you know, it's already loud, you know. Even if you have to go through a ceiling, whether it's wood or iron, steel, whatever, it's definitely going to make noise. There are people living there. Yeah, we'll manage somehow. Yeah, okay, we'll manage somehow. Yeah, we'll do it somehow like we did here. Okay, whatever, but we'll sort it all out, Philip. Just take care of your own stuff, okay? Then I thought, okay, you guys rappel down. Then I looked at the team and assumed they would have to rappel down from the roof like 4 or 5 meters. And I'm not saying this out of arrogance, like I was physically fitter. I was actually fatter and less fit than they were. But still, I thought to myself, okay, I could probably still manage to rappel down even today. I could imagine rappelling down 5 or 6 meters. I think I could still do that. But then I said to them, well, you guys have the 20 PlayStations and all the games. Let's say those are really huge boxes and so on. I'll put it this way. The problem could be climbing back up. I said none of them would have managed to climb up that rope like we did in school. But we'll deal with that when the time comes. I say, no, I don't know. You should think about that beforehand. When those big packages are there and the hole in the roof, and then how everything is gone with the cars, the noises and lifting things up, I say once you're inside that thing and you can't pull yourself up on the rope, then it's going to suck. Wait for someone to unlock it in the morning, then say, hi, here I am. Those are the kinds of things that were suggested. And then there were a few things that actually worked out. Yeah, so then, I don't know, maybe 7, 8, 9, 10,000 euros came together over time, and everyone knew, okay, this is getting more and more professional and so on. Through rappelling and climbing up, I previously asked what the gang was called, and we ended up naming them the Ninja Gang. Yeah, all very, very ironic, and as a joke, we called them the Ninja Gang. In the clubhouse, we always told them we'd love to see how they do that from our attic. So Yeah, and then always I said, well, this would be great. I said, just let a rope hang down and then pull yourselves back up with a box or help each other. We'd love to see that sometime. Toman weighed around 230 pounds. It takes effort to get that moving. He was holding 3 PlayStations in his hand. In any case, they had some success with a few things. Just a quick personal note, if you want to support us, my book is out. Hate Breeds Violence Games bestsellers. King Among the Kongs is the brand behind the product. Check out the links below the video to support us in our work, de-radicalization, anti-violence work on the internet and or at schools. So lots of options, thumbs up, thumbs down, comment, all of that helps. Thank you very much and ahoy, the video continues. When I talk about others like that, it almost seems as if I'm picking on them. Ultimately, I have to reflect on the one it's really about, myself. From an outsider's view, I don't care, and it's evident there are things here I simply won't accept. No, that won't work and smells like trouble. Please, no, thank you. But still, during my greedy phase, I always kept an eye out thinking, okay, maybe an idea will pop up where I could use someone from the ninja gang or the ninja gang itself where they could do something. I'll be honest, there were always things going on that I heard about where I didn't want to get my own hands dirty, where I said, no, I don't know, and let others handle it. The expected comments are par for the course. Even in the big clubs, you don't believe that most presidents go out and do things themselves or anything like that. The money flows from the bottom up, and from the top down comes pressure and dirt. Still, as I said, lower ranking people are then assigned and given the opportunity. Like, here, I have a tip for you. Whatever you get out of it, you get 30% for the tip. You can split it up in the ninja band on the right or something. And then once again, it was about Rostock. I had heard from Daniel, we had just done that thing with Daniel where we relieved that guy from the radio station of his drug debts. And then he said, yeah, I drove someone out to the club. And then he said to me, I have an acquaintance who I sometimes sleep with. She works in some, I don't know what these clothing stores are called, but it's a chain. Not a huge global chain, but one all over Germany. However, it doesn't really matter, right? And she works there and they're too stingy. They just changed it so that the daily takings are no longer picked up by an armored car company, but the employees have to take them to the bank themselves. Okay, that really makes you pay attention and you say, okay. And then I said, Daniel, I said, what are we actually talking about? What are the daily earnings like in a clothing store like that? You mentioned that she occasionally earns between 20 and 30,000 euros there. I said, oh, come on, she doesn't just walk out of that place. Somehow 1 or 2 kilometers through Rostock every Thursday, Friday or whatever, on the busiest days, she wouldn't walk around the city with 20 or 25 grand in cash. The Spaniards calculated that having employees handle cash transports instead of paying for the service would save money despite the apparent expense. You really have to have faith in God for that. There are probably statistics about it too showing that, okay, it only gets stolen twice a year or even 5 times a year, it's still cheaper. Like if we pay the cash transport company, but of course that also puts the employees in danger, and damn, I was hooked again. The big fish, Philip, was on the hook and was thinking about the 25, 30,000. You only hear 30 grand. That's also such a phenomenon. I only heard 30. Some days there were about 12 people in there. We're already making $30,000 a day. And then I got on board and said, yeah, listen, I have an idea if I were to ask there. And then I also asked the guy from the ninja gang and said, hey, listen, I need someone to go to Rostock with me, and based on a tip, we're going to do a robbery there. There would have been several people involved, you can imagine. First, the girl who gave the tip. She didn't want to be robbed herself to avoid suspicion. She wanted to be the informant to let us know when the person would leave so we would be informed. So first the informant got money from the store, then Daniel, who set it up, passed it on to me, and then I brought in the ninja gang with 4 people, you might think, to split the 20 grand into 5,000 each. The informant, she gets, let's say, I don't know, 10%. And then the one who actually carries out the robbery, I always knew that he has to get the biggest chunk, the one who really goes in there with the gun and says, hey, give me the cash. I can imagine that back then we did something like 10%, 20, 20, 50. Or because he wanted to suck up to me in the club and said, no, we'll split my 50% too, and with yours, then each of us gets 35, 35, and then 20, 10. Such matters should be discussed and clearly settled in advance through sitting down together. I learned that too because I didn't settle things like that beforehand, and then suddenly afterwards, you didn't know I get 98.5%? Yeah, I thought that was clear to you, and so on. Discussion, that's what I learned even today. I say who gets what, who is involved in what way, who covers which costs. That's what I learned in crime. Everything I clarified before always led to conflict, trouble, discussion, money, and full-on attacks. Okay, so we went into planning, the 3 of us. First, is the girl trustworthy? Okay, which gun are we taking with us? And this is real, this isn't made up. You have to imagine it. This was in Rostock, right in the city center. The store was somewhere on Langestrasse. And then somehow, Gate, there's a shopping arcade there. Always go to the savings bank. There's a big savings bank on Langestrasse, and from the bank there are stairs going down. Stairs, good thing I can show you what stairs look like. Well, you had to go up several flights of stairs, about 40 or 50 steps, and behind that there were around 8 parking spaces for cars. I apologize if I'm over-explaining this to you today. Sorry. And that means, okay, we had to go to the savings bank, which was covered by a big old bar with concrete pillars and so on, a bit dark. And you could basically carry out the robbery just before the bank because doing it right in the middle of the city center. I also knew, okay, there might be some hero here, an undercover cop, police or something like that. We have to pick the corner that's the worst lit and where we can escape the easiest. The plan was that Pearl would contact me from a prepaid disposable phone to another prepaid disposable phone. I'm already with O-Punked from the Ninja Gang in Rostock, and Daniel is waiting somewhere with the car. That means we wanted to make a kind of chain for how we would get away. He was supposed to do the robbery, run away, and while running away, stash the money at a place we had agreed on. We checked everything out beforehand, of course, drove there. It's not like we just did it on Google Earth and said, yeah, roughly we'll do it like that. We had already set off. He was supposed to do the robbery, then run around the corner and stash it. I go completely inconspicuous, just like people know me. You can't make this up. If I don't tell you about it, I feel sick. So I go as a completely inconspicuous person, just someone who happens to be shopping in Rostock, and then I take this, it's supposed to be a money bag, just a regular, ordinary money bag. And then I was supposed to take this money bag, head towards the city, and Daniel would be waiting for me there. Then I would run off with Daniel, and O-Point was supposed to jump on a motorcycle and speed away, stash the bike somewhere, then we'd pick him up and go to Daniel's place, split the money, and everything would be peace, joy, and pancakes. That's what it looks like when you plan a robbery like that. Now you might think, did I ever think about that? The person who sends her colleague away in the store, the same colleague she has coffee with during the day and goes to the club with on weekends, and then she sets us on her to hold a gun in her face. I never thought about it, and I don't even want to imagine what kind of impact that had on that person's life, and I'm sorry for that. But you don't think about that because greed eats your brain. And then there was the day we had also taken a sawed-off shotgun. It was a triple-barreled one. It was really just like maybe this long. What is that? Maybe my head 40 long or something. And then we drove off, did all that, and then we really stood around downtown, stood around for 2 or 3 hours, 2 or 3 hours with the weapon in the middle of the city with the cell phones and waited. And here's something where I'm not quite sure how it all went because it didn't happen. It didn't happen that money was split up. There are several rumors about this story that I don't know what really happened. At first, the blame was put on Pearl for not making the call, for backing out and saying, no, I won't do it after all. And if we get caught, I could go to prison for giving such a tip if someone gets robbed on the street. That's armed extortion. Was there such a rumor? Then there was the rumor that O-Punkt didn't go through with it. After he then was in the city and not reachable, and then I waited for hours and he didn't come. Yeah, it's a bit difficult because well, we didn't hear anything about a robbery, so I wasn't tricked or anything. It's not like I lost the money, but in any case, it just didn't happen. And the problem is what you have in your head. You think you've already spent the money, like the 55, 70,000 that I was supposed to get from the 30 or maybe even 40,000 today. You've already spent that money in your mind. And so you're just pissed off accordingly. But that's when O-Punkt kind of made an impression on me. He was a prospect with us and I thought, okay, he's walking through the city with a gun and so on. That really impressed me back then, like, wow, awesome when people do that and those are the kind of guys we need. But it just didn't happen. But I thought, okay, at least he's doing real talk and maybe he's actually one of the ninja gang who really knows what he's doing. It definitely didn't happen, but I'm not just here to tell you stories from my life that worked out. These are also things that simply failed. You put a lot of energy into it. It's a lot of criminal energy. That's what it's called in court. It fails, as simple as that. It just doesn't work out. And then there's a bit of tension and you already start getting worked up about it. Okay, back to Wismar with Daniel and back again. And I don't know, we have to check again, maybe do something bigger after all. And yeah, it was done well anyway, but it's a shame, it sucks and so on. But the ninja gang kept working on their own and now they've focused on, yeah, we need to do bigger things. For that, we need better equipment. Where do we get better equipment from? We'd need to get that from the fire department or Technisches Hilfswerk. We'd have to get the stuff out from there. They have huge, those car cutters, cutting torches and so on. Then we could make huge safes and whatever else. We could pull off much bigger jobs. And then it was supposed to start that the ninja gang would also start eyeing other things. And especially arms trafficking too. And how that continued and what role others played later on and what kind of mess happened with this ninja gang. You know what, guys? I'll tell you about that next time. Check out kingunterdenkongs.de. There are new things there. As always, I remain with an ahoy from the coast.